Okay, welcome to my photosynthesis concept presentation. I apologize for the lack of organization. I decided last night to change my plan because I read this great article by Parker and Co. called Exploring Undergrad's Understanding of Photosynthesis Using Diagnostic Question Clusters. They use these diagnostic questions not to identify common misconceptions, such as students not realizing that the majority of the plant mass, the carbon comes from the carbon dioxide and not from the nutrients in the soil. Or another common misconception is that the end product is glucose, when in fact the glucose are building blocks for a complex carbohydrate or cellulose or starch. To eliminate these misconceptions, they decided they needed to change the instructional framework. So they decided to start with scientific principles such as the conservation of matter, the conservation of energy, and the hierarchical nature of biological systems. They used these principles, in addition with the basic concepts of photosynthesis, to come up with 3 practices which to form their instructional framework for photosynthesis. It would be the practice of tracing matter, the practice of biological systems, and the practice of tracing energy. Using these 3 practices, they're hoping that students at the end of the unit will have less misconceptions than taught using the traditional methods, light-dependent, light-independent structures. To start, we're going to look at the practice of tracing energy. And the practice of tracing energy includes identifying the energy that's transformed or transferred. So the photons of light, which is the sunlight. The energy is the form of sunlight. It then gets changed into a chemical potential energy, which could be in the form of ATP, NADPH, or back into your glucose. So they have to start realizing the energy comes from the sun and it's transformed or transferred into different types. The second one we're going to look at is the practice of tracing matter. The practice of tracing matter is talking about following the reactants into the products and where they actually come from. So we notice the carbon comes from the carbon dioxide into the glucose. I also like to use Play-Doh. So the students start to realize that the carbon dioxide brings in the carbon, joins in to the ruby P, and you end up with an unstable 6 carbon that quickly splits into 2 into 3. So they can then continue through the entire cycle where it's going to turn into either a complex carbohydrate or it'll go back up and start as ruby P again. So they're going to trace the matter all the way through, realizing where it comes from and so on. The third one is the practice of biological systems. And that's when you're going to look at the structure of the plant structures and how they facilitate the functions. For example, in the thallicoid, you've got the small thallicoid space, which allows for the quick proton gradient to form, which then drives the ATP synthase. So that's the biological systems. Now, when we are doing this, you can either, one way I've found is using the Play-Doh makes a really good model. So you could have the photon of light comes in, splits our water molecule into 2 hydrogens, a half an oxygen, and our 2 electrons. The 2 electrons are back into photosystem 2. The photon of light activates them into a higher energy level, and they go through the electron transport chain whereby the energy puts the protons through. And you end up with an increased concentration. Because the gradient, the protons are going to flow through the ATP synthase, and as they do, it's a little bit like a windmill with the water current. They're flowing through, and as they do, it spins this, and as this spins, it provides the energy to pop a phosphate onto an ADP, and it forms the ATP. They now know that this energy has become a chemical potential energy, which is going to help change the matter, the carbon dioxide, and so on into the Kelvin cycle. So using the Play-Doh is a good way for the students to get their hands on, figure out what the systems are, where they are, and how they all react. I won't go through the entire thing of that one. All right, for the curriculum expectations, we are looking at C2122, as you can see, 3.2, 3.3, and 3.4. I am going to start with Lesson 1. We will be doing a gizmo, which I spent a lot of time this weekend looking for. I didn't know where gizmo was and decided I needed gizmo in my life. So we're going to do the exploration cell energy cycle. They're going to learn about the reactants and the products of photosynthesis. This is when we're going to be talking about the practice of biological systems. We'll be reviewing the structures of the plant, and specifically the ones that are involved in photosynthesis. There are also various animations to look and a few video clips to hook them on. Lesson 2. We're going to be looking at the practice of tracing energy. And we will be using the Play-Doh. The students will be making a Play-Doh model similar to this one. They will be watching a couple of animations on the light-dependent system. For lesson number 3, they will be doing the practice of tracing matter, and they will be using a system, the Kelvin cycle, where they're going to be putting in the Play-Doh, where we have our carbon dioxide coming in with our Ruby 5, and they will be completing it all the way through. So hands-on, really getting an idea that it's a cyclic system and where the carbon moves through. So they're going to trace the matter, tracing the carbon all the way through. There is also animations on that, so they get to watch the Kelvin cycle. Lesson number 4 will be another gizmo, and it's going to be a photosynthesis lab. And it's going to be about exploring the limiting factors on photosynthesis. I would also use this lesson for students who have not understood photosynthesis yet. I would take that time, instead of them completing that lab, we would go back and do another hands-on, go back and see if we can fill in some of the gaps. Lesson 5 will be a small group project where they're going to be looking at implications of photosynthesis in society. They will have to brainstorm a list, and then in small groups they'll have 30 minutes to come up with a mini presentation. For the assessment, I've decided that they could do either a paper slide video of either tracing the energy or tracing the matter, or they might want to do an electron race commentary or a carbon race commentary. So pretending they're at the horse races and they say, and off they go, the electron is on its way, and first it's here and there and all the way through. So they're going to have to talk about where the electron goes and what it sees. So they can pick on those two different types of assessments, and everyone at the end of the unit will have a test. And I thought I would use the questions that Parker and Co. came up with and see how it goes. That would be their assessment. Student difficulties and strategies, same thing. It's very much one-on-one. Some people might need to simplify the vocabulary. They might need to make the system a lot smaller. They might need to chunk the material. It all just depends on the student, but you need to be very flexible. And in those lessons, there's going to be a lot of time, especially with the explorations, that you can do the one-on-one. Dialoguing really helps. They're going to have to be able to talk about how the system works. And I think that might be it. Okay, thank you.